Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. As always, my name is Jay, and in this video I'm going to talk about the latest index card update that happened today. Actually, it's kind of similar to my video yesterday discussing that there was going to be an FAQ or a rebalancing in the near future. We kind of started to see that today. It wasn't like a rebalancing for points or anything, just more of an errata for all the index cards, and there were a lot. Most of them weren't huge, to be honest. The words "and close combat weapon" was added to a lot of profiles. Cool. I'm actually a little disappointed that one of my questions wasn't addressed in this errata, but it was addressed in a different codex. So I think it should be fine, but I'll address that in a second. There was the biggest changes were actually just they settled the argument for Imperial Knights. I'll go with talk about that one in a second, and they've adjusted the way that Gene Stealer's Cult Ambush rule works, and I think it's going to change the army. The more I think about it, yes, it will. It's just, it's interesting. It's interesting. We'll talk about that in a second as well. And I'll briefly go through all the index cards, just a summary. I do apologize if I'm skimming over your army. It's just a lot of things were just simple war gear fixes, I found. Very few was actually rules, but some of the rule ones were quite interesting. So, of course, let's start with the big things. So up first, of course, we should talk about one of the armies that was affected the most by this index, Imperial Knights. They addressed two things. Number one, the Code Chivalric rule, and the other one was the Code Chivalric, the Code Chivalric, and of course the lay low to the Tyrant. So the Oath ability. So the first one, of course, is that they actually put in a line ending the sentence saying that the additional CP is an exception to the rule that you can only gain up to 1 CP per turn, right? So in the CP gain, if you fulfill your rule, you get 3 CP, and obviously you can get more than 1 per turn. On a side note, I actually was a little disappointed that they didn't address this for the Dark Angels Codex, which the Master Commander rule, I apologize if I get the name wrong. Azrael has a rule that if he's on the battlefield, you gain an additional CP as well. They didn't address that too. So of course that's how I play it, because you should be able to gain additional CP if it's in the rules as written and intended, right? I know the rules say you can only gain 1 per turn, but it's obvious that if Azrael's there, you get an additional CP, and they should really have addressed that in that codex. It wasn't addressed in these updates, so that's okay. And of course the big one is lay low to the Tyrant. It's now changed the word from a to single. So you can reroll a single hit roll of 1 and a single wound roll of 1, which is how most people have been playing it, because the reroll ones is just pretty insane, especially depending on if you can bond. Some are hitting on 2s. So that's a great way. That's a great solution to a big question. I think it should have been written like that originally. I don't know why it was ambiguously written to begin with, but that's huge. It fixes that problem, and that way it fixes it going forward as well, which is awesome. And the other one is Squire's Duty Stratagem. When resolving attacks that target enemy units, improve the strength and armor penetration characteristics of weapons by those armor gear models by 1. Just clarifies that rule too. So already, Imperial Knights, it's more streamlined, more straightened out. They finally addressed a question that had been bugging a lot of Imperial Knight players and people playing against Imperial Knight players. Which one is it? Is it reroll all hits of 1? Is it a single dice? Now it's a single dice. We have a rule. Awesome. That's pretty fair. Brings Imperial Knights down a little bit, but makes sense. That's a very fair rule. And of course, the other one that was really affected was Gene Stealer cults, as I mentioned. They've basically, the two things that they've really addressed is, of course, Cult Ambush and the Italian Jackal's Demolition Run, which they mentioned in the video as well, has been very successful. So first of all, we'll talk about Cult Ambush. So they made changes to both the first paragraph and second paragraph, and I want to discuss the implications of these changes. The new wording is saying, on a 4-up, add a new unit to your army identical to your destroyed unit in Cult Ambush, at its starting strength and with all its wounds remaining. So instead of just taking the same squad theoretically and putting it back on the table, you're creating a new squad identical to the old squad and then putting that new squad on the table. The implications are, for keeping track of purposes, if your opponent's trying to keep track of how many units they've killed, or anything that's a one-use. If there's any one-use war gear inside the squad, then theoretically it's used the first time, right? And if they die, a new squad who is identical to the first squad comes back and is put on the tabletop, which renews their usage of the one-use items. So they get to use the one-use items again, and that way they could reuse it again, and so that's cool. So that makes it stronger. However, the next one makes it weaker and more interesting. So the next one is, and set up that unit on the battlefield more than 9 inches horizontally away from all enemy models, with at least one model in that unit touching the cult ambush marker. And all other models placed wholly within 3 inches of the cult ambush marker. 3 inches. So the cult ambush markers that I typically use are like this big, because they're from the Codex. My genes are called Codex. And so you really have to wrap those models really tight in a ball, basically, to get all the models within 3 inches. I tried it before this video. I can do it with 20 hybrids. 20 of the Acolyte hybrids, and basically it's possible. Now, if you're having giant units of models with bigger bases, like Gene Stealers, and it gets more difficult, or if you have a giant blob of the Neophyte hybrids. If I said that, Acolyte hybrids earlier. Neophyte hybrids, I wrapped a squad 20, and I could get them all within 3 inches. But again, so this makes it more interesting. Maybe it'll favor more smaller squads, because if you have giant blobs of guys with big bases, it might be very difficult to wrap everyone within 3 inches of the marker. That's a very tight circle. And you can't, also what it does do is it prevents people from conga lining them outwards and really spreading them far. They have to be very tight in a very tight-knit ball, which kind of nerfs it obviously nerfs in a sense, because not every squad then can be brought back to life. And when they're very tight. You can't conga line them out and spread them out. But again, still a good rule. It's still going to be a powerful rule overall. I think it brings down the Codex slightly, and just makes it more fair. Cool. And then Talon Jackals, the Demolition Run, which is again very successful from what the video said. It's once per battle round after. So again, after this ends a normal move. So it's just once per battle round. Makes sense. You can't do it unlimited times per battle round. Cool, right? It just makes it more realistic. Those are the two really factions that were most affected. Eldar got a lot of errata, but most of it was just all war gear, adding close combat weapons. So Eldar players, in the comments, if you want to just address that, was there anything that was actually particularly strong and powerful? It looks like it's just a bunch of war gear changes, no rules, just like, just adding the word one close combat weapon to a lot of like the Knight Centura for Adeptus Custodes, and the Autarch, for example. The model Starglade can be replaced with one of the following: Banshee Blade or a Scorpion Chainsword. This model can be equipped with one of the following: Howling Banshee Mask, Manda Blasters. Cool. Same with the Autarch. Way Leaper, same thing. But basically, yeah, it's just mostly war gear stuff. The Wave Serpent is the main thing was the ability Wave Serpent Shield. They implicitly put in the sentence "in your shooting phase," so it can't be done in the opponent's shooting phase. It's once per battle in your shooting phase. You can select one enemy unit that is within 12 inches and visible to the model, and roll a d6. On a 2-up, that enemy suffers d3 mortal wounds and must take a battle shock test. You can't do it during your opponent's turn. Cool. Makes that fair. Astra Militarum, same thing. A lot of just war gear changes slightly. They made the Exterminator Autocannon Rapid Fire 4 twin linked, which is cool. Death Corps Secreed. For every 10 models in this unit, one Death Corps Trooper's Lasgun can be replaced with one of the following: a Lasgun and a Vox Caster. Cool. As I said, most of them is just Black Templars weren't very affected. Chaos Demons. One of the changes to the rules was Blue Horrors. It was while an enemy unit is within 6 inches of this unit, if the unit contains one or more Blue Horror models, worsen the leadership characteristic of the models in the enemy unit by 1. It just clarifies the rule. Great stuff. Let's take a look here. Let's go down. Death Guard. As I said, most of the other armies are unaffected. Dark Angels were really unaffected. I was really hoping they would address the Azrael rule as well. Death Guard. The one is the Death Guard Sorcerer and Terminator Armor. The Putrescent Vitality is at the start of the fight phase. You can roll 1d6. You know, they added that line in. Cool. As we already addressed, Imperial Knights and Gene Stealers. Leagues of Votann. Enhancement card, the Appraising Glare. The second sentence is changed to until the start of your next command phase. Straightens out the rule. Athar, the Destined. Once per turn, you can change one hit roll or one wound roll made for the model from this model to a 6. It's or. Clarified the rule. Awesome. There was I forgot it was Leaves of Votann. People were really debating on one of the characters. Orcs, once again, pretty much unscathed as well. They weren't affected. Then, like, the stratagem mob rule is effect until the start of your next command phase for mob rule. While friendly Orcs infantry unit is within 6 inches of that mob unit, that Orcs infantry unit can still be selected as a target of your stratagems, even if it's battle shocked. Cool. Some minor rules as well. Space Marines just got a lot of. It's just, again, just minor tweaks to the cards. And that's about it. As I said, Tyranids, maybe I'm missing one. Tyranids, there was one rule as well I wanted to note. For Barb Gaunts, which are very popular for Tyranids right now, the abilities Disruption, Bombardment, first sentence changed to, in your shooting phase, and after this unit has shot, select one enemy infantry unit. Unit hit by one or more of those attacks made by this unit's biocannons until the end of your next turn. That enemy unit is disrupted. So it has to be infantry. Cool. Makes it a little more realistic and easier. And that's about it. But as I said, it's a start. It's a start of an the index updates. They're listening, and these minor tweaks. This is all they have to do. Like a little bit at a time, minor tweaks, and see how it impacts the game. It doesn't have to be giant points increases or decreases. In this case, it addressed, this, again, as I talked in my last video, it addressed Imperial Knights, some ambiguities, which were silly. It should have addressed Dark Angels, but it didn't. It addressed Gene Stealer Cult, the bikes, they were very powerful, they've been slightly brought back, and the Cult Ambush rule has been slightly weakened as well. So it's a start. It's just a start. What do you think? What do you think of these updates? Obviously, hopefully we can get this game closer to perfection with every update and having a great time, and slightly towards balance as well. But what do you think about the update? Leave comments in the comment section down below. Do you think major changes? I think it's just some slight stuff, but it will have impact in the game for sure, especially among the top armies. And yeah, as I said, let's create a discussion. Thank you for watching this video. Until next time, this is Jay saying.